In early 2022, FTX, a crypto exchange, was valued at $32 billion and a household name. It took fewer than 8 days for Sam Bankman-Fried to go from being nicknamed the king of crypto to his company filing for bankruptcy. Now there are speculations of not only money laundering, but the failed crypto exchange took in millions in donations for Ukraine, but allegedly rerouting the sums back to U.S. politicians. Conspiracy theory? That's what we want to find out in this edition of Economic Divide. Coming up in this program, the FTX fall, money laundering operation, millions in donations for Ukraine, crypto donations went to Kiev's war effort. That's what was reported. Next, crypto's destination. Now, it's supposed to go to Ukraine's national bank, but some of that went to U.S. political donations. The FTX CEO donated roughly $38 million, maybe a little bit more, to the Democratic Party. And then we will take a look at FTX regulation scheme. That's right, this thing is pretty widespread, where FTX spent millions lobbying to shape crypto regulations. Now keep in mind, Democrats are responsible for overseeing the Trade Commission.
Since the war in Ukraine began in February 2022, Western nations and their politicians and billionaires began to rally behind Kiev. Apart from weapons, they began to offer donations to officials in Kiev to keep the government functioning. But it has now turned out that some of those donations were not so innocent. Notorious cryptocurrency exchange FTX and its founder Samuel Bankman-Fried has filed for bankruptcy. His company was once valued at $32 billion, and its owner had a net worth estimated at more than $15 billion as of late October. His company began to fall apart last month. It has now emerged that his company functioned as the central clearinghouse for all crypto donations to Kiev's war effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that gets to the point that this can be a great thing for the world. I think it can also be a really messy thing, but I think that at its core, you know, we've seen millions of dollars go through you know, the systems we've given. I think something close to $1 million ourselves as well to support you know, humanitarian aid and growth in Ukraine. And you know, I think when you think about what it would take to get you know, to get funds both to the government there, where we do have a relationship with the Ukrainian government for raising capital for them using cryptocurrencies.
But the money sent to Ukraine by Democratic politicians in the U.S. would see their money come back in the form of donations through FTX. In more simple terms, the company was transferring money to Ukraine and then laundering money back from Ukraine to the Democratic Party. As an example, other parties, such as the Republicans, were also noted in this.
All right, time to find out what is being posted on this as we speak. There's been a social media storm on FTX and its bankruptcy. So let's get going. First up, like we have been saying for months, the Ukraine war is nothing but a money laundering scheme funded by U.S. taxpayers. This particular view obviously seems to hit it right on. Next, how else are they supposed to get U.S. tax money back into their pockets? That's what we've been saying in this program, and we would elaborate more on that a little later. Next post, well, they would be absolutely spot on. It's a proxy war, with the only winner being the military-industrial complex. They are earning a fortune of our taxpayers' money and giving massive donations to the Democrats' DNC through FTX and others. Next, great question, is Washington still our ally? EU accusing U.S. of profiteering from Ukraine war through sales of guns and gas and threatening trade war, as top diplomats moan Biden's green subsidies means European businesses are relocating to the U.S. What we did was we further expanded on this as soon as the Ukraine war started. President Zelensky partnered with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried for crypto donations. It posed this question: is this greed or is this corruption? Well, let's take a look at this a little bit further in terms of this partnering with FTX. Everstake to launch new crypto donation website. FTX is converting crypto contributions to Ukraine's war effort into fiat for deposit at the National Bank of Ukraine. The Ukrainian government launched a new crypto donations website, streamlining its multi-million-dollar effort to turn Bitcoin into bullets, bandages, and other war material. Aid for Ukraine, which has the backing of crypto exchange FTX, staking platform Everstake, and Ukraine's Kuna exchange, will route donated crypto to the National Bank of Ukraine. The country's collective efforts have already raised some $48 million in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Other estimates are placing that amount closer to $100 million. All right, so those posts we picked because they kind of fall in line in terms of some of the things that we're assuming at this point about this fallout from FTX, and of course the different connections it has from money laundering to U.S. political systems. But let's find out what our guests think about this. First up is Vijay Varghese. Now, he's a managing partner at Amparo and Company. It's a global liquidity provider and also market for precious metals, market maker that is for precious metals and digital assets. Vijay Varghese, welcome to Economic Divide. FTX was valued at one point to be $32 billion. It was a household name. And then you have this Sam Bankman-Fried becoming an official billionaire. Thanks to obviously his secondary and more high-profile business, which was FTX. Now, the crypto exchange grew to be the second largest in the world. He was estimated to be worth $16.7 billion, but in 8 days the firm collapsed. How could that happen in such a short amount of time?
The way it happens is this. The way FTX was structured, the way it was built, it was designed by its own inception to be something other than a quote-unquote crypto exchange. Its setup is very similar to what you find not in a stock exchange or a stock market or an actual physical crypto exchange, but something you'd see similar to an Enron. In fact, when experts have taken apart FTX's corporate layout, they've seen over 70-plus entities that we know of, and possibly even more, that was within its corporate structure. And you only get a structure like that if your whole design was to money launder, your whole design was to move money, steal funds, mix funds. Nothing good comes out of a structure like that. That's number one. And number two, a 28-year-old kid out of college, there's no way in hell a kid like that could come up with a structure like that. This was created for him. FTX is a creation of very, very nefarious private interests that are right here in the United States.
All right, thank you for that. We're going to throw that point to our next guest and see what he thinks. Craig Holman serves as public citizens. He's a Capitol Hill lobbyist on ethics, lobbying, and campaign finance rules. And also he's an expert on campaign finance. Craig Holman, welcome to Economic Divide. All right, now there are charges against FTX when it comes to the failed crypto exchange that it was a money laundering operation. It took in millions of dollars, if not more, in donations for Ukraine, but allegedly it rerouted some of these sums back to U.S. politicians. That's a very severe charge. Now, in terms of the Democratic Party, the second largest donor was Sam Bankman-Fried, pouring in some roughly about $40 million into Canada's coffers in 2022 alone. Do you see that? Do you agree with that?
Well, one part of that story is true. I mean, Bankman had laundered actually even more. Personally, he gave about $40 million to Democratic lawmakers to try to avoid regulation of the industry. And then his co-conspirator, Ryan Salami, gave about $23 million in campaign contributions to Republican lawmakers. All in all, the cryptocurrency industry has, in just the last 2 years, has literally increased their amount of campaign contributions to American lawmakers by almost fivefold. And that was all designed to try to prevent Congress from coming out with a strong regulatory scheme.
The info news section of the program is here. That's where we take a look at some other news from around the world with an economic flavor. First up, we're going to take a look at what's called bypassing SWIFT. SWIFT is a financial system in which Russia and China have plans to bypass it. Now, these trading partners have been boosting transactions in national currencies. We've been telling you about that all along here at Economic Divide, pretty much. The Russian Deputy Prime Minister actually has said, quote, in gas contracts, we are already switching to settlements in national currencies. So there you have that aspect of it, which is happening in rubles and in yuan, Russian ruble and then the Chinese yuan. And that's happening on a parity basis. He then added supplies of oil and oil products, as well as coal, are also being switched to payments in national currencies. Just a side note here, Russian price cap on its oil was actually approved by the EU, something that Russia has outright denied. So we have to wait and see how that's going to affect the way that transactions are happening when it comes to Russian oil. All right, next up, we're going to take a look at protests that are happening at Amazon. You've heard of Amazon, I'm sure. They have staged walkouts, and this came on Black Friday, in which it was called Black Friday Employees. And what they did, these protests happened across the globe, and they demanded Amazon to naturally pay better wages and to improve their working conditions. This has been going on for quite some time, actually. Now, these protests happened from Germany and France to the U.S., from India to Japan and the United Kingdom. It shows how vast it is, where Amazon's employees downed their tools and joined marches for that Black Friday. All right. EU gas purchases, I just mentioned the EU. In terms of insider EU gas purchases, the European Union has spent actually $13 billion on Russian LNG this year. Go figure, how is that possible if they're being actually sanctioned? Now, that's 5 times more than in 2021, in which the highest demand came from Belgium and from France. Now, the surge in LNG imports this year shows the difficulty in punishing Russia for its special military operation in Ukraine. I wonder if Belgium and France actually knew that there was going to be a cap on the Russian oil, and they were the ones who actually have spent the most buying it. Anyways, taking a look at this particular piece of news, this is very important in terms of a split between the U.S. and France. The French president has warned that subsidies paid to U.S. companies under a vast green energy plan may split the West as a whole. He further added that U.S. industrial subsidies are, quote, super aggressive against French and European competitors. Trade tensions clouded his high-profile state visit to the U.S., which he paid a visit to the U.S. just very recently. Okay, those were the 4 news items that we picked with an economic flavor. We really do appreciate it if you send us news from where you are or from your part of the world. Contact information is on your screens now. We've reached a segment of the program called the In-Depth section, where we will look at the relationship between FTX, Ukraine, the United States, and in particular, the Democratic Party, and in turn, FTX contributions. Let's first look at the timeline of events that are important in maybe answering any ambiguities there. First, in September 2021, Ukraine formally legalized crypto. Then comes February 2022. Russia's special military operation in Ukraine began. And then we're taking a look at February 26. Kuna, which is Ukraine's largest crypto exchange, receives crypto for the war in the same month. Now, this crypto exchange is what it received was called a war effort donation. Next up, we take a look at a month later from that date, in March, Kuna's collaboration with FTX began. It said that it worked with the FTX to convert cryptocurrency donations into Ukraine's government-issued currency. Now, as to the amount of the money that flowed in, officially this is what was reported, close to $100 million in crypto donations. Now, the Crypto Fund for Ukraine, run by Michael Chobanyan, he's the founder of the Ukrainian crypto exchange Kuna, accounted for 60% of all the donations. In case you were wondering why crypto, because crypto donations allowed Kiev to obtain funding instantly and then deposited them in the National Bank of Ukraine. Now, FTX's connection to the U.S. political parties. FTX's CEO, Bankman-Fried, has become a major Democratic donor. FEC records showed that he made significant donations to Democratic candidates and PACs, including a $27 million donation to the Protect Our Future PAC, which supports mostly Democratic candidates. However, he has also made contributions to some Republican candidates. Now, maybe this diagram can put things into perspective, titled U.S. Tax Dollars at Work. You're going to see kind of a flow chart there. Money came from FTX in the form of donations to the Democratic Party and PACs. The party itself will then obviously back Biden. Then Biden gives the U.S. tax dollars in the form of military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Then Ukraine uses the U.S. aid to partner with FTX. Now, the parts that's most concerning, all of them, frankly, but the U.S. military and humanitarian assistance. The U.S. has given billions of dollars to Ukraine. Don't forget that. And then finally, when it came to the 2022 U.S. midterms, let's take a look at who were the largest donors. Now, in this case, since our focus is on Sam Bankman-Friedman, he was the number 2 donor. You can see over here, George Soros came in at number 1 at $129 million. All right, in case you didn't get that flow chart or anything that we just talked about, let me reintroduce our guest. Vijay Varghese, managing partner at Amparo & Company, rejoins us to tell us what he can. Well, our question to you, first of all, welcome back. Our question to you, Vijay, is the news that Ukraine accepted donations towards its military defense against Russia via digital currencies. The first question that comes to mind is, why is it accepting digital currencies in the first place? I mean, if you want to take a look at the amount of money that the U.S. is contributing to this war, it's billions of dollars. And maybe that is one of the reasons. What do you think? What is the reason for that?
Oh, yeah. And it's a great question. And I'll tell you right now, if this was simply a war of attrition with Russia, and part of it is, okay, there's many layers to this whole Ukraine thing. But when you just look at why, just the question is why digital currency payments were used in Ukraine right at the same time where the U.S. is sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, and then all of a sudden, left and right, many brand new Ukrainian exchanges, cryptocurrency exchanges were popping up. The answer is really simple. If you want a fast and efficient way to covertly fund various groups that are in Ukraine, and we know that the Azov Brigade, the Banderistas, the Stepan Bandera, those who follow this Nazi ideology that's so prevalent within the Ukrainian power structure, if you want to fund some of those people of the most ill repute, this is a great way to do it. It allows you to fund very quickly. It allows you to get your money, get your capital into whatever dark, nefarious project you want to get into, whatever missions you want to run. And then what it also does, it covers you from any sort of congressional oversight.
I think the key word there, the phrase, was congressional oversight that our guest Vijay said there. Let's see what Craig Holman thinks. He serves as a public citizen's Capitol Hill lobbyist on ethics, lobbying, and campaign finance rules. Craig, welcome back. This deal with the cryptocurrencies being accepted from Ukraine, coming through anonymous donors, really, is something that is very much under question here in terms of what I'm asking you, because we don't quite understand why that is. Why is Ukraine receiving it via cryptocurrency? Why is the U.S. Actually okay with sending it that way when it's billions of dollars that we're talking about here?
Well, I am not a believer in the whole cryptocurrency industry, so I would advise everyone to stay away from cryptocurrency. But what was going on, there was a cryptocurrency startup company in Ukraine called Everstake, and it was their idea to try to pull in some more money from foreign sources to help pay for the war effort. And they did pull in roughly about 60 million, according to records, to pay for the war effort. So they were just trying to come up with other means of getting investments that they could use to buy helmets and other things to help defend themselves against Russia.
Back in March, the FTX launched crypto donation platform Aid for Ukraine. Practically, it set itself up as a central clearinghouse for all cryptocurrency donations to Kiev. But the company funneled at least some of that money back to the U.S. through political donations. Bankman-Fried was once one of the most important donors to the Democratic Party for the midterm elections. He poured nearly $38 million into candidates' campaigns in 2022.
Oh, yes. Her staffers have been talking to a lot of folks in the industry, trying to figure out what was really going on. And in fact, actually, one of them was very, very interested in the question, how did FTX get so big so fast? And those of us in the industry who were watching what was going on and frankly were appalled by some of the behavior that was taking place there, we knew what was going on. And again, a lot of this has already been reported to law enforcement and it's starting to come out. And I expect there will be more that does come out. So yes, they've been watching this and they've been on to the right questions, I think. And let's see now whether there's follow through in Washington. At this point, who knows?
In March of this year, the government of Ukraine passed a law that creates a legal framework for the cryptocurrency industry in the country. It allowed banks to open accounts for crypto companies. According to reports, the Ukrainian government had already received over $60 million in crypto donations as of March. That money has not been updated since then, and there are no reliable information about the exact amount of money Kiev has received in cryptocurrency. The reasons for Ukraine's push towards cryptocurrency were under question, especially at a time when Kiev is already receiving huge sums of money from Western nations. Ukrainian officials have not provided any detailed and reliable reports on spending. Ukraine is said to have spent 75% of the money it raised through cryptocurrencies, but what happened to the remaining funds cannot be unambiguously explained. Critics say the lack of full-fledged reporting has cast doubts on the proper use of the service.
Bitcoin's use in military operations has been on the rise since the Ukrainian army received Bitcoin donations. According to new statistics from blockchain analytics startup Elliptic, within a 12-hour period, there was approximately $400,000 in Bitcoin contributed to Come Back Alive, a Ukrainian non-profit group that supports the armed forces. Elliptic reported that the crypto donations reached hundreds of thousands of dollars and has been poured into Ukrainian NGOs and volunteer organizations attempting to counter Russian military operations. So, how does Bitcoin benefit from the military operations? Volunteer groups have historically supplemented the work of Ukraine's military by providing additional resources and manpower. For instance, when the former pro-Russian Ukrainian president Viktor Yanukovych was deposed in 2014, volunteers stepped up to assist protesters. In order to provide support, these groups often accept funding from private donations via bank transfers or payment applications. However, cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin has grown in popularity since it allows users to avoid financial institutions that may prohibit transfers to Ukraine. The volunteer groups and non-governmental organizations such as Come Back Alive, which has accepted cryptocurrency since 2018, have used the Bitcoin for a number of purposes. These include buying military weapons, medical supplies, training services, and drones for the Ukrainian army, as well as supporting the development of a facial recognition device intended to identify whether someone is a Russian soldier or a spy. Cryptocurrency fundraising is becoming an increasingly important component of current conflicts all around the world. One of the appeals is that the money cannot be traced to the sender. This could even include governments and their officials who may want to send funds in order to remain anonymous. This puts into question the goal of the governments, which in the case of the US could be to start a color revolution like it did in Ukraine. According to an MIT researcher, Jason Lowery, who is an astronautical engineer in the US Space Force, Bitcoin can play a critical role in national security, and the US should acquire Bitcoin to counter the impact of other nations potentially seeking to wean themselves off US dollar reliance. Okay, that's the end of this segment of the program. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
In conclusion, there are two important issues here. First, FTX being a money laundering operation, moving money around in Ponzi scheme style. But the more important issue, really, there are two of them. First, using crypto money to fund a war through anonymous donors. Is that the trend now? And then to create instability in another country, maybe. Then governments using their own money, with politicians getting some of that money back in the form of payback, for example, crypto obviously. Now that is a very, very dangerous game on both fronts. Think about it. That does it for this edition of Economic Divide. It was great for you to watch us. Of course, we would really appreciate it if you send us any comments, questions, or critiques contact information is behind me. From Mikhail and the team, it's goodbye until the next Economic Divide.